Hello everybody, ciao a tutti and welcome to Art with Ms.B. Today we're going to spend some time together with this tutorial that is specifically thought and designed for students, beginner intermediate. I decided to do a series of videos inspired by my students in school at North Star Academy in Bluffdale. And I will guide you in a very nice and simple step-by-step art tutorial in which I will teach you to draw basic but still more effective and better trees. Sometimes when I teach my students how to draw landscape, I like to scaffold for them and teach them how to draw details that they will include in their landscape. The better you master some basic elements such as trees, bushes, flower, the characteristic things that you will find in landscape, the better, the more improved your landscape will be. And you will feel really proud, you will feel very happy, and you improve your technique as well. For this practice, I'm going to use a white piece of paper. I will design directly with a black Sharpie. I highly encourage you to use the pencil so you can erase, mostly if this is your first practice and you're a very beginner. I will do two different types of trees, and I suggest you to do the same in one single practice if you have the opportunity and the time to do it. So you can compare both of the trees at the end of the practice, and you can kind of decide which one do you like the most, why, what was different between the first and the second, what can you change or improve in future practice, right? Both trees are very pretty and they will be, you can include them in any landscape that you will design and draw in color in the future. I will use markers because they are faster and so the video is not too long. But if you want to do more work on blending, shading, and value, I encourage you to use coloring pencil. Maybe you can do this practice with me exactly as I do it with markers and then do it again with pencil. I will do it as well. For what concerns the colors, I grab a series of different tint and shade of brown and a series of different tint and shade of green. Now, if you don't have so many greens available and so many browns available, remember that even with markers, we can kind of blend a little bit of work on value. The way that you do it is you can overlap the same color markers over to make the color more intense, darker and more saturated. If you have a light and a dark green, you can overlap them. So you can create a third type of green. So you will have the dark, you will have the light, and then you create a medium one. And then you can grab a yellow on a light orange and you can overlap those colors on top of the green, so they will give you a different type of green. So you need to be creative. The same is for the brown. You can overlap the same brown twice or three times to make it look darker. Just be careful, don't overdo it because you can break your paper. I will also teach you a different type of strokes that you can use to make your coloring more effective even with markers. So now I'm gonna switch the camera and we can do this practice together. And I see you very soon with another one. Ciao. Okay, this is my page and I'm gonna use the Sharpie. As I suggest you use the pencil because you can erase and change, things that don't go exactly as expected. Once instead you use the Sharpie is on the paper and that's it. I'm gonna do a couple of different trees. One is very basic and this is where I suggest you to start, and another one it's a little more update. So look carefully to what I do and you can do the same. We're gonna start just like a set in the top and you use a very nice and curvy line. Then we're gonna go down, and remember that your line doesn't have to be too perfect, right? We're gonna do a sort of the same, just longer for the roots. So the tree looks really well planted on the ground, and then we're gonna go up again with this nice line. Now for the top, we're just gonna use a nice swirl curvy type of line. Pretend that you're doing a cloud, right? You can shape it as you want. Don't make it too perfect. Don't make it too perfect. And you can go all the way on the back. It's nice to have some asymmetry because it's gonna make your tree look a little more natural. Then you can also add a few texture marks here and there. and this tree is ready for you to color when you will be ready. Now we're gonna design the second one, okay? The second one is gonna be a little more advanced, and it will allow you to be a little more creative for what concerns the top. So let's start from the bottom this time, okay? You're gonna do like, start from a side. You're gonna create your roots, very similar to the other one. Remember, don't make them too perfect. Then we're gonna come up with this like a not perfect line. Maybe we're gonna add a little branch over here already to create some variety in the trunk. Now we're gonna come up with the second line all the way up. And now instead to do this type of top, we are going to kind of create branches. When you create branches, remember, you go slow, be intuitive, close the branch, and you go from, let's say, thicker to thinner, and pretend that you're doing a sort of like fingers. So you spread those branches out. One is longer, maybe open up a little more. You go back in, just go slow, because the slower you go, the more control you have on your pen, pencil or marker, so the better you will be able to guide your hands in doing exactly what you want it to do. We're gonna do like that. And remember, I'm using the Sharpie so you can see very well, but if you use the pencil, it's even better, because the pencil, once you color over, it will disappear, leaving you no marks whatsoever. And we can close it here. Now for the top, we're gonna use the same type of nice curvy line, but we're gonna just kind of do tiny little bushes on top. So let's pretend once again that we're doing clouds, right? Your will look better if you have been using like the pencil, because you will be able to cover all the markers. So you're gonna start doing this type of line, right? Tiny little cloud, tiny little cloud. We keep going. Remember, we are not gonna make them perfect, right? We wanna have some overlapping, so you can have also something in the background, right? Then we're gonna keep going. This one, we can close it already. So for example, you see, you can still see my branches because I use the black Sharpie, but in case you have the pencil, you will do the clouds, you will do the coloring, and the branch will disappear inside the leaves, which is exactly what we want to, right? So this one, let's say this one, we're gonna do it on the back. This one, we're gonna start it over here. And this one, we close it back. We don't need to put anything in here, but if you want to, you can do a tiny little clouds over here as well. Now, always with a pencil, and then you will be able to do it again with colors. You can add some nice, very sketchy, lighter lines for texture, right? Because the trunk of the tree is a beautiful, nice texture. And remember that when we create the optical illusion of texture, which is called implied texture, we kind of make our drawing a little more like realistic, a little more effective and more interesting. The same, you can do it in your basic tree, right? Mostly because it is so basic that you can kind of add and improve it. So this is a very nice point, like a starting point for you to be able to draw a tree. You see, in the case you have a landscape, this is gonna be the ground, and the tree looks exactly nicely planted on the ground, right? If we put it instead on top of the line, it would not look realistic. It will not give you the same, effect and final product. So I'm gonna use my dual tip alcohol marker, but you use what you have to color. Actually, if you have coloring pencil, you can do way better, because with the coloring pencil, yes, it is true that we take a longer time and it's a little more like tiring as a practice, but it is also true that you learn a lot about color value, so light to dark and dark to light, and you can blend and mix multiple colors together in order to create exactly the color and the color palette that you aim for. Now with markers, we're gonna do the marker coloring just because it's a little faster, right? And I want you to be able to complete this practice in one time. So at the end, you can do some consideration and compare and contrast these two trees. And they are both, as you see, very nice. They both are pretty simple. This one has a little more work to do, but it's gonna give you more flexibility than when you color it, for example. So you can add more implied texture and more element to it. This is very basic. Now, as I teach art in school, from kindergarten all the way to 9, when I started to teach my younger students to do basic drawing that can be included in more complicated practice, it is important to start with these basic practices and get very, very familiar and very, very fluent, right, in them. Because, for example, when it's gonna be your time to do a landscape, instead to do a whatever tree or a tree that doesn't look realistic at all, you can actually start to do this type of trees that will make your landscape way, way better and more effective. Now, even if you're using marker, we can try to do some value, which means that you can start to use some darker and then lighter tone to fulfill the leaves of the trees on top. For example, I'm using this pretty dark, nice green around the edges of the tree, and when I put my marks of implied texture, because even when we work with markers, sometimes we need some variety, right? Not all the time we want to have that plain color. Sometimes we do want that plain color and we need that. Sometimes instead we want some variation in the palette. So according to what you're using, if you're using a pencil, you can actually set one coat of pencil and then work in some of the area with a darker pencil. If you're working with crayons, you can do the same. Watercolor is a little different, and I put a beautiful practice about a tree with watercolors. Maybe we can do it in the future as well. And then you can use another, maybe, let's say, lighter green. I don't want to go too light, so let's see if this one is good enough, or I want to go darker. Sorry, lighter. This one is still pretty dark, but I love it though. So I'm gonna use this one that it's slightly different than the first one that I use. It will give me some consistency in the color, because as you say, you know, as we say before, with markers we don't really shade and blend. So we have something that is a little more like a saturated and more consistent. And you can use these nice strokes, even if you have a big Crayola markers. They are usually the one that we use in school. Instead to put it in vertical, put it in a diagonal position, and you will be able to do this kind of thick, nice strokes. Remember, don't do this fast coloring. Speed coloring is never a skill that we train. It doesn't really help us in anything. It's gonna just tire our hand and tire our markers. And so sometimes when we see, oh, this marker is over, no, it's just because it has been used too fast. So if you do really too quick movement, you won't allow the ink of the marker to penetrate properly in the paper and give you a beautiful, beautiful result. Instead, if you do like that, you're not gonna get tired. You can still have thick marks that allow you to color like pretty quickly. And just by changing the direction of these strokes, you see, curving in toward left, toward right, you can create a little implied texture on our tree and make it nicer, right? Kind of more specific. And so as a teacher, when I see my students work on landscape, for example, I highly appreciate this type of details, because it shows that you have a better and deeper knowledge of more advanced technique, and you're actually taking care of these details that make a huge difference in your artwork. Details are very important, friends. So I always say that if you feel that you're a little tired, that you take a little break, but then you go back to it properly. You never rush through something. You see now, with this nice type of curved lines, we have a nice, beautiful texture. Now let's color this tree. We're gonna use different type of brown. As I say, you use what you have available. I think that maybe I can use this one that is a really, 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 really light. And then I'm going to overlap a little darker brown. So I'm gonna show you also that with markers, you can do sometime like tiny shading, represent some value, like shadow. And because this is a little more advanced, we want to also color it with a little more advanced technique that will improve so much your landscape or natural environment drawing. When you need to draw a tree, now you know exactly what to do. If you need to go back to this video, you go quickly. You can accelerate the video, see it nicely, and then just as a reminder, and then proceed exactly as we are doing it right now, step by step, real time, so you know exactly how much, more or less, it would take to design and color a pretty nice tree that shows some more advanced technique. Color the roots. Up and down. Now I'm gonna switch to a darker brown, and I'm gonna do some nice, like I'm going over not everywhere, but only in some specific area. I just want to create this difference between the darkest brown and the lighter brown. Probably branches on top will be nice and dark because they are covered by the leaves, so they don't get too much sun. And then definitely I will choose a side of the tree to be a little darker, and I'm gonna just go with this nice almost undulated lines. I'm gonna go down. I'm gonna dark up the roots as well. Gonna dark up this one too, and then maybe I'm gonna go along these black marks that I trace, so it's a little more like interesting. And sometimes you see something like that happens, you can go back. This is why I say maybe the outlines will be better to do it at the end, but I just you know, in order to show you very well the lines, I did them at the beginning. You can nicely and easily retouch with the black, just thickening a little bit the outlines, so you covered a little mistake. Now, once again, for this one, we're going to use this maybe very light green, so we can kind of compare in contrast. And once again, I think I'm going to use, let me see, the brightest one first. And I'm going to use the same type of technique with these nice curved strokes. So at the end, I can still see some texture and it's not boring and plain. Maybe because you have a tiny little bushes, right? You can also use different green for, this is exactly what I'm gonna do. You can use different greens here and there. I'm gonna use this green here. Maybe this green, I will use it here. And once again, it depends on how many greens you have available. But remember, friends, that we can create our color, right? So even with markers, if you want to dark up something, you have maybe only 2 greens, but then you can overlap them and have a third type of green. You can mix a little bit of yellow on top of the green and have a brighter and more intense green. So you can kind of be creative even when you don't have so many colors available. Of course, with penciling, it's gonna be a little easier for you to blend and create more color, as well as with watercolors. But even with markers, we have our options and it's going to be fun. Nice, you go over. It's a tree, so we want tiny little like strokes and imperfection. Now I'm gonna switch, I'm gonna use this green and see what happens. I'm gonna place it here. Still light, similar, but little different from the first. Nice. Small strokes. I'm gonna use this here, maybe this one for this one. And if you want it a little darker and more intense, you can overlap with one more coat of the same color. Beautiful. Now I'm going to use a little darker green. Let's see. And I'm gonna use the darker green for this one. I'm gonna use the darker green for this one in the background. Now this is smaller, so I'm gonna pay a little more attention. I'm gonna make sure that I cover everything, also behind the branches, between the branches, right? Now I'm going to switch to another green. I want nice and bright it here. And if you don't have this type of green, you can make it by adding yellow to a very light green. Nice and textured. You see, I'm not scribbling and I'm not leaving any gaps. I'm just doing some nice, let's see if this one is good, maybe the 43 for the last. Yes, I like it, nice and dark. So as I was saying, you don't need to leave any gaps and you don't need to scribble, even though you want a little texture, right? We will be able to fulfill all the gaps just doing this type of curvy strokes. Once again, if you want to kind of dark up some of the part of the tree, you can go on top with different light green on top of the green that you already set, and you will increase the value, so the shade, right, the shadow, the light, darkness, nice, like that. And maybe with this one, which is the same bright, we can go on top, not everywhere, but just whenever we want to kind of increase that value and the implied texture. So even with markers, we will able somehow to shade, create some value and a nice texture. So these are my two trees. And as we say, you can include both. This is a little more basic, this is a little more advanced. And I feel that if you learn and you master this technique, you will be able to create amazing landscape. I hope you had fun and you learned something new.